Welcome to the REI Hacker Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of real estate success. Join us as we dive into the journeys of top investors, mentors, and industry experts. Learn from their experiences and navigate the highs and lows of the investing world. And now, let's hand it off to our host, Benson Juarez.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for this edition of the podcast. I am really super excited. My friend Damon Remy is here with me today. He is the CEO and founder of REI BlackBook, and he's been so gracious to take some time to spend with us today to talk about what he's working on, his story, talk about REI BlackBook, and some of the other projects that he's got his fingers in. So, Damon, thank you so much for taking the time, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Excited to kind of chat and, see if we can help, uncover a few nuggets for folks.
Awesome. So I was looking at your backstory a little bit. I don't know a ton about where you came from, but one of the things that I wanted to thank you for is your service. I appreciate you, your service to our country. You were a Marine for many years.
Yep. Yeah, age 17, man, I signed the dotted line. The Marine Corps recruiter, I remember it very vividly. He walked into my high school and he was dressed in his dress blues. And I was like, man, how do I get that uniform? And he's like, it's pretty easy, just sign right here. And, I just gave up, 4 years of my life, so to speak. But candidly, I look back on that time in the military and, as a young 17-year-old kid, man, it gave me a lot of direction and a lot of discipline that I definitely needed. But yeah, it also was a crazy, amazing, fun time. It's crazy. At one point in time, I actually said, I feel like, service to your country, service in the military should almost be obligated. But now that I've got kids, I've got 4 kids now. I'm like, man, I don't know if I'd want to send my kids off to the military now, but It was a good time, man. But thank you.
Yeah. No, I think I was on a podcast recently as well, and they were asking me like, what are some of the main contributors to my success? And I certainly look back at the military and the discipline that comes out of it. They break you down and then they build you back up a better person than when you went in. And that's why I think it would be good for a lot of people, because they just don't experience that kind of thing in the real world.
Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, I still love to hire veterans as well. If you walk in and you're sitting across from me and I'm interviewing you, like, I just know that you're going to have traditionally, you're going to have really good discipline typically. And like it's very beneficial time. Now remind me again though, what branch did you serve?
I was in the Air Force. It started off as Air National Guard, did 6 years, and then 9/11 happened, got activated and sent to a couple different places around the world. I was military police, or in the Air Force, it's called security forces.
Yeah. So my older brother was in the Air Force. Okay. He's 7 years older. And that's actually one of the reasons I kind of went the military route. I was born and raised in Texas, single mom, welfare kind of kid, literally growing up in the trailer park. But my older brother, he was 7 years older than I was. He left early. I left and joined the Air Force. And so I was like, all right, the military. I remember he came home one week for vacation or whatever, and he was driving a new truck. And to me, it was like, oh my gosh, dude, you have a brand new truck. Like, how? Like, and he's like, well, it's the military, It's like I'm like, all right, that's what I'm doing, man. I'm going to go to the military. And when I joined, I was originally going to go to the Air Force. Because that's what he did. It was like, all right. And then again, man, that recruiter walked in that uniform, and I was like, man, those dress blues. Like, literally, that's how it's crazy how I look back on that. And that's such an important decision in your life. It's like, oh, it's because of the uniform. But my brother flew home as soon as I signed and joined the Marine Corps, man. He flew home and was like, Damon, dude, what are you doing? Like, the Marine Corps is like the worst. They're going to brainwash you. Like, he was adamant that I shouldn't go to the Marine Corps, but it made me want to do it that much more since he was so against it. So, yeah.
Well, you had already signed on the dotted line at that point anyway, so there was no getting out of it.
Yeah.
The Marine Corps would have been fine too. The reason why I joined was because a friend of mine had joined the Guard to pay for school. And, I was in college and I was working, another job, and, we didn't grow up with money either. So I was hustling my face off and trying to have a social life at the same time. And the military made a lot of sense financially to help me get through school. And we would have never been able to afford it otherwise.
Yep. Yep. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then those signing bonuses, and you get steady income, and right. And then you can afford those kinds of things. But I do believe that, there's some education, right, that came out of that as well. The discipline and the camaraderie, right? Learning how to work with others, learning how to, be your best self in situations where you're under pressure or under duress. What was one of the biggest things that you learned by being in the military?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I look back on that time, first of all, it gave me the introduction to technology. So it literally shaped the rest of my life because, now I'm a technology guy. I run a software company. It's what I do. I really kind of fell in love with technology. I grew up in a very small town. And when I say small town, man, I was like literally the only boy in my grade school class, right? I went to school with 5 other girls, super small town, farming, ranching, oil field. That was really, the industries, if you will. And so I didn't really grow up with a lot of technology around me. But being introduced in the military, I think it introduced me to a few things. First of all, diversity.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a very small town, not much culture, to be honest. And so the introduction to diversity, I think, seeing how people work together on teams, then really introduction to the tech piece, which really changed my entire life, man. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I don't know where I would be. And, I honestly was going to retire out of the military. So speaking of signing bonuses and everything else, man, I didn't get a signing bonus. I scored really high on my ASVAB, did all that stuff, but I thought I wanted to be an accountant. Right. So I joined the Marine Corps and went to their dispersing, which is basically payroll. Like they manage all the payroll for the Marine Corps. And I graduated #1 in my class, did really well. And then when I went to check into my very first duty station back in like 1994, I'd been meritoriously promoted. I got meritoriously promoted out of boot camp. I got meritoriously promoted out of MOS school. So I was already like an E3, which basically made the difference in this regard. So I checked in. The master gunnery sergeant basically gave me an opportunity in the accounting office. This was again 1994. And so technology guys, their MOS was technology to support the network and everything else. Those guys weren't staying in, man. So there was big reenlistment bonuses and everything else, but they still couldn't keep the technology guys because the civilian sector was so hot, like they could just go get a high paying job. And so basically what that really meant was for the accounting office, we had to support our own network, right? And support the computers. We had probably 500 dispersing clerks and payroll clerks. And so the master gunnery sergeant, when I checked in, man, I was checking in with 7 other guys. And he said, look, you're the senior ranking member. If you want, there's an option that you can go work and learn how to support our local area network, the LAN.
Yeah.
If you can support the LAN, and you'll do that for 6 months. And I was like, sure, I'll do it. Like,
yeah,
I loved learning, young at the time, and had no idea that what I would really stepped into would change the entire direction of my life. I absolutely fell in love with the technology aspect. I was working with Banyan Vines. It doesn't even exist anymore.
Okay.
Right. That was the local area network server and everything else. And what I had done, man, is I started, the other thing too, man, I was in Camp Pendleton. So a couple hours north of Tijuana. It's legal age. You could go drink in Mexico. And so every other weekend, man, I would be in Tijuana. And then the opposite weekend, I would stay in the barracks and I would study the local area network stuff. And I would, I did that for probably 3 years, man, and just really absolutely kind of fell in love with technology. And I ended up never working in my MOS. So basically I was pretty good at the computer stuff. And they're like,
right,
we're going to leave you in that department. And you're not, I didn't have to do any of the payroll clerk stuff or do any of that stuff. Now, the only downside to that is that I spent 4 years, and again, I was going to reenlist. And when I went to reenlist, all of the IT guys, the ISMO guys, what we call them, Information Systems Management Office, all those guys, even though I was doing the job, they were all getting like $30,000 and $40,000 reenlistment bonuses. And so I was like, yeah, man, I'm in, I'll re-enlist. And they're like, yeah, but your MOS is 3432. You're a disperser. And so there is no re-enlistment bonus for you. I'm like, but I'm doing the job. Yeah. It's like, I've literally been doing this for 4 years. And they're like, well, what we'll do is we'll change your MOS after you re-enlist. I'm like, if this is how it's going to be, man, I'm getting out.
Yeah, that's a trip.
So it's a blessing, but looking back on those times, man, it was a blessing in disguise, man. Had no idea. And I got out and I went to work for Pepsi. So whenever I was in the Marine Corps, my officer in charge, so my OIC, he was a captain. His last name's Crisp, Captain Crisp.
Oh, that's a cool name.
Yeah, man. It turns out his grandfather had bought the bottling rights to Pepsi back in like the 30s. So he's third generation Pepsi bottler. He actually ran the largest independently owned Pepsi bottler in the country at the time. They covered 5 states. And he called me and said, hey, dude, don't re-enlist. I've got a job opportunity for you in Southern Illinois. I was like, what? I mean, I grew up in Texas, man.
Right.
And he literally was like, dude, we, kind of painted the story of what they're doing. It was, probably a $500 million operation, really pretty big business. He's like, dude, this was 1998. And so the Y2K conversations had started. Right. And, the world's going to end. Everything's going to change once the computer flips over to 00 and it's going to think it's 1900. And so he called and said, hey, look, we had done some really cool stuff in the military together. And so he said, hey, we need to revamp our technology infrastructure, man, in place of Y2K. And so I got out and went to work at Pepsi and I led it was probably a $15 million project, man. We implemented PeopleSoft. I don't know if you familiar with that platform at all. Enterprise resource planning and ERP platform. The cool part about that though, man, was that was like what I consider my MBA. So I didn't end up going to college, even though I went to the military. It was like, I'm going to do this so they pay for my school and everything else. And I procrastinated, kind of drug my feet, never used the GI Bill. I funded it, paid for it, did everything. And I just never went to college, never went to school. But I consider that time at Pepsi, man, that's kind of like my MBA, man.
OJT is always more valuable than an MBA any day.
Yeah.
Of course, an MBA is like sometimes how you get through the door. It looks good on a resume and people seem to think it holds a lot of value, but you came and you just did the work, right? And that's more valuable than theory, which what most of those, degrees is like, okay, this is all theoretical. I remember when I was in school, I went back to get an MBA. Actually, right before 9/11 happened, I was in college to get my MBA, and it's like some of the people teaching those classes weren't in the private sector, or they weren't in the real world doing this stuff. They were just teaching it, and I had done several businesses since then. I'm like, I know more than some of these people do, and so I got activated for 9/11. Right. And then I got sent overseas and I was pretty bummed at the time, but it was kind of a blessing in disguise as well. Like, not having to go through the whole MBA thing when really I'm just an entrepreneur at heart anyway. Yeah. There wasn't a place for an MBA in an entrepreneur's thing.
That's really what they need, man, is they need an entrepreneurial degree. Like that's really what they need at school, man. I would have been all in, I think. Yeah. I think, I actually did sign up. So whenever I was in the Marine Corps, while you're in, they will actually pay for your classes basically. So it's you can basically go to school for free, man. So I was like, all right, I'm going to take advantage of this. And I remember I signed up for a computer class because I was super interested in the technology piece. And I remember this is way back, man. This is going to date me a little bit, but do you remember the zip drives? I don't know how old you are, man, but like I think we're probably pretty close in age.
I think I'm a little bit older than you.
You think? I don't know, man. I'm 48. How about you?
I'm 49.
Okay. All right. So I figured we were pretty close. Yeah. So back in the day, do you remember the zip drives?
I do.
Yeah. So zip drives had just been introduced and that was like a whole new shift, right? It was went from the floppy disk to a zip drive and they could hold like 100 meg, if I remember correctly. But I went to the very first computer class and it was a computer science class and the instructor, the teacher was talking about a zip drive and he's like, this will hold 3 times what a floppy disk will. And I'm like, No, well, it's like massively more than that. And it was like, dude, I'm doing this every single day in the military and in my hands-on technology every day. And I was like, this guy doesn't even know. And so I dropped the class. And then honestly, man, I never, probably a lot of things in my life, man, it's just, gut reaction, and look back, it's like, I probably should have went and stayed, but at the same time, man, here I am. So,
well, you found your path, right? And it's funny. So when I was in the military, I got out in 2003.
okay.
And I was actually doing loans during the day. I'd go to the base at night and do my 12-hour shift at the base, guarding F-16s.
Okay.
And I started making a lot of money slinging loans. And
like mortgages, like
mortgages. Yeah,
okay.
Mortgages.
Dude, we got a lot in common, man.
Yeah. So I did that. That was my first experience with real estate investing, was doing loans for real estate investors. And, I first started noticing that I was giving a lot of business to real estate agents, and they were making 3%, and I was making maybe 1 point on a loan. I'm like, wait a second. Yep. So I got licensed as an agent. And then my time was up in the military, and I had an opportunity to re-up, and there was a bonus. I don't remember how much. It was like 10 grand maybe. But I was like, man, that's like 1.5 loans. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to go into mortgage business full time. So you were at Pepsi.
Yep.
Right. And then something got you interested in loans. Like, how did you transfer from managing lands at Pepsi to the mortgage business?
Yeah. So at Pepsi, I was kind of managing that whole Y2K project, but I was in small town Southern Illinois again. And so I grew up in small town Texas, right? And then in my time in the military, I was pretty much in the San Diego area and in between San Diego and LA. And I'd really grown accustomed to the city life, if you will, right? Like things to do. And the nightlife at that Southern Illinois town was Applebee's. And, St. Louis is about a 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive. And I came up in 1998, man. I drove up to St. Louis, and I came to a Cardinals Cubs baseball game. And the Cardinals Cubs, man, like it was Sammy Sosa, Mark McGuire, they're, the home run, and after the game, I went out in St. Louis, and I was like, I gotta move to the city. Like and so I basically made the decision to get out of Pepsi and left, and ultimately ended up landing in the mortgage business in the early 2000s, right? So that was really early 2000s, and was really wearing the marketing hat, the technology hat, kind of supported the actual loan officers. I wasn't a loan officer. I was more like marketing support and marketing manager. And one of the guys in our office, he was really heavily focused on real estate investors. He had built a pretty big network of real estate investors, and he had created, his name was Jason. So Jason had an email list back in the early 2000s, man, when, this was before Constant Contact, before that stuff.
Right.
And if what he did was, if you emailed Jason, you would email him your property, and then he would email it out to everybody. So he basically had the big buyers list. And if you needed a contractor, you email Jason, and then he would email out the network, and then, people would connect. So that was the very early days. And so I supported him in that role, and tried to make it easier. And ultimately what I did is I built our own email servers, just kind of leaned into the technology aspect, built our own email server so that we could send out the emails easier and faster and had more control, did all of that stuff. And then the success of that email list actually was its own demise, because then, we started sending out 30, 40 emails a day, and people were like, dude, I'm getting too many emails. And so I had a simple idea. It was like, what if we created a server that you could log in? And this is 2004, right? If we set it up, and you can set your own profile. And so you can set up what type of properties, what type of, what areas of town, what type of properties do you want? And then we'll send out those emails to you only if it matches your buying criteria. Right. And honestly, man, that was the early REI BlackBook. Like literally, that was like, we built it and was like, look, you're going to log in and you're going to set your preferences of what properties you want to get notified on. And then once we did that, it was like, like that grew really quick. Our mortgage business was, going like gangbusters because, we could see all of the deals passing back and forth, man. So we had access to it. We had visibility and worked like gangbusters, national recognition, Mortgage Originator magazine, top 200 list. I had not one, but two guys on the team recognized in that magazine. But that was 2007 was the year that we were recognized in Mortgage Originator magazine. So
Just
you
in
already know
time.
what's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so 2008 comes along, man, and completely devastated us, right? Like, we go from doing 100+ loans a month, man, to, less than 10.
Right.
And as well as I do, man, your income is proportionate. Now, the one thing that I did as well, though, you said you went and got licensed as a realtor so you could get, basically double dip, right?
Yep.
Well, along those lines, I met a girl, we got married, and I convinced her to go get her license.
There you
So
go.
I was double dipping, man, but my wife was a real estate agent and I was really making money on the loans and on the mortgage side. And so when 2008 hit, man, I mean, we had 2 kids at the time and it wiped us out, man. Facing foreclosure, filed bankruptcy to avoid foreclosure. I always joke that my father-in-law didn't like me, and it was a good thing because I was sitting, ironically enough, at a holiday, right? And we're sitting there kind of chatting. I was like, "Hey, Ted, have you ever thought about finishing the basement?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, I think Jackie and I are going to have to move in because we are flat broke."
Oh,
And
man.
dude, humbling experience, right?
Oh, for sure.
Because I mean, we went from making, dude, I mean, we were making, a few $100,000 a year in the mortgage business and real estate and just, humming along. And then I think in 2008, man, I looked this up the other day, we made about $15,000 combined. Like, I don't care how frugal you are. I don't care how many coupons you cut, you're not going to make it on 15 grand. And so Jackie's dad, my wife, her dad, Ted, I think it was probably a $3,000 or $4,000 check that he wrote to catch our mortgage up so that we didn't lose the house, and then ended up going through bankruptcy. And through that whole time, man, it was like, all right, we have this tool that real estate investors are still using, even though we're not getting loans from it. And we started adding things to it, right? It's like, what else do you need as a real estate investor? How can we make your life easier from a technology perspective? And so we had added like contact management. We had added, advertising so that they could market and advertise their properties, on sites like Craigslist back in the day. So real estate investors were still using the tool that we had built, but we weren't getting loans because, most of the traditional retail stuff was, come to a grinding halt. And so we just asked ourselves a really simple question, said, hey, do we think investors will subscribe? And this was before software as a service. I mean, obviously I know you've got a software product and you get SaaS and you understand that world, but this was really before that. Like, I don't even know that SaaS I didn't know the term. I didn't know that it even understands subscription revenue or any of that stuff. I was just flat broke and needed to feed my kids, and pay the damn mortgage. And it was like, how can we get money? It's like, we got this tool, maybe real estate investors will pay us. And October 1st, 2009, I actually sent out a ringless voicemail because we had everybody's contact info because they were already subscribed to the email list and things like that. And we sent out a ringless voicemail, invited everybody to the local Elks Lodge, and we provided free pizza and beer. And in fact, as a mortgage guy, you'll appreciate this, man, because I sent out the email and the subject line on the email was stated income is back, right? And this was like 2009. And then when they opened the email, I basically said, hey, just kidding, but we got something just as good. We're going to host this big launch party.
What a hook.
Yeah, it was, man. It's probably the highest open rate that I've ever received on an email, right? For real estate investors with stated income being back. And so we basically hosted a party, man. We said, hey, look, we're going to buy a bunch of beer and pizza, come out to the Elks Lodge. We got this idea, and I presented the vision of REI BlackBook and said, hey, this is what exists today. We've got some tools and everything else, but we need funding at the end of the day. And here's where we think we can go, and kind of painted the picture of a platform for, to help real estate investors do more deals, less time. And then I asked for $1,000, I was like, look, man, if you guys give us $1,000, you'll never pay another subscription fee. And that was October 1st, 2009. Happens to be my mother's birthday as well, man. So it's kind of a lot. I lost my mom when I was young, man. So it's kind of ironic that it happened on that day, but it did. And so pitched and presented. I didn't know anything about sales. I was a pretty hardcore tech guy. You'll appreciate this, man. I presented for 4 hours, a bunch of technical stuff. Never like, it was just crazy. I look back and we had like 300, 400 people show up that night. I mean, it was a really well-attended event. You know, when times are tough and you're giving away food and beer, people show up, you know?
Yeah.
And at the end of the presentation, I basically pitched it and said, hey, look, $9.97 tonight, and you won't have another subscription fee. Nobody moved. I didn't tell them to go to the back of the room. I didn't I didn't, know nothing about presentations and the formats and all that stuff, the frameworks. And I remember this guy who's sitting in the front row, man, his name's Ron Mink. He's a hard money lender in town now, but he waved his checkbook at me. He was sitting in the front row. He's like, well, what do we do? Where do we sign up? I was like, oh, go to the back of the room. There's order forms there. And then he stood up, and then 49 other people stood up and went to the back of the room with him. And we made 50 grand that night. That was the seed capital. It allowed me to go hire my first full-time developer, right? Nice. When took that money, put it in escrow, went and hired the guy. Again, family member. He's actually still with me today. It's my wife's cousin. He had just graduated Mizzou with his computer science degree. I was like, hey man, here's kind of what I've got going on. Here's what I think. And I said, I don't have a lot of money, but I've got 50 grand that we just made, and I'm going to put that in escrow account, and that's going to be your salary. So guaranteed payments, I'll know I can make your payroll. And he's like, all right, I'm in, but I need a MacBook. I was like, all right, dude, I'll buy you a MacBook. Like, that's it. And so that's how we launched, man, back October 1, 2009, man. That's how we started.
That's a great story. Yeah. You just pre-sell, right? It was like kind of like the launch formula scenario too, right?
Yep. The irony is now I look back on all that stuff and it's like, okay, I did some things right. I did a lot of things wrong. A 4-hour presentation that should have been probably 60 to 90 minutes. I know the format. I know the formula now. I did a lot of things right by accident, and a lot of things wrong. But, you look back and I learned a ton. Within about 6 months of launching, Rich Dad discovered us, so Robert's educational company discovered us and licensed the software, right?
Awesome.
So they licensed the software, and that was like, you go from 0 to 100 miles an hour really quick, man. I mean, yeah, I think
probably had a big backlog of things you wanted to build at that point. And then they come on board and you're like, oh man, we can fund all this. Let's do it all.
Yeah. Hindsight being what it is, I don't know that I would have built an all-in-one platform like REI BlackBook is today.
Right.
I probably would have picked one thing, maybe the phone system, maybe, one thing, and built that. But again, you don't know what you don't know. And whenever Robert's team came in and licensed, we had originally, we had launched in St. Louis, and it was really heavy networking. So the reason it's called BlackBook is like, it's your little black book. It's like your little connection of real estate investors. And so we kind of had this Facebook component before Facebook. And so it was a networking community. You had your own profile, there's chat rooms, all that stuff. And then, we had the tools as well, but we were going to launch market by market, and we were going to go to Chicago next. And then we were going to go to Kansas City. But then Robert found us and was like basically overnight, man, we're in every freaking market. And so that then forced us to all right, we can't just focus just on the networking part. We have to build tools that work in any market. And so we started on the building websites and CRM and phone systems, and then the automated, marketing, the workflows and follow-up systems. And then that's really kind of how we got started, man.
Before we move on, I want to say that your 4-hour presentation, I think you did it right, because it gave them 4 hours to get saucy. And by the end of that 4 hours, they're like, where do I sign?
Yep. That is the truth. I will tell you, we spent a lot more money on beer than we anticipated that night. I promise you. It was like, man, the keg was flowing for sure. But yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, that was, when did Robert Kiyosaki get involved? Like what year was
So
that?
2010. So it was the summer of 2010. So it was July. They actually asked us to come and participate in what they called at the time the Rich Dad Forum. 1,500 investors. It was in Vegas. Pretty sure it was in Vegas. Yeah, it was Vegas. Went out to Vegas and they had a big trade show. They actually gave us a booth. We couldn't even afford the booth, to be honest, but they were really intrigued by the software and like, we'll give you guys a booth and see what you guys can do. And they honestly gave us a little cocktail table. It wasn't even a full booth, you know. And I set up and I had a monitor and I did demos the whole weekend, and we ended up being no stage time. So no presentation from the front of the room. And we were the second or third highest grossing partner they had at the event. And so they were like, all right, people want this. Yeah. That's pretty obvious. So we want to license this. And so within 12 months, man, they licensed the product for every new student. So every new student, and they were signing up 300, 400, 500 people a month. And they basically licensed the product. Now, I was shocked that they never white labeled it. Honestly, looking back, that probably would have been in their best move, and or just buy me. That's probably what they should have done. But they rolled it out as REI BlackBook, and that ultimately really allowed us to kind of build our brand and name recognition, and and then somewhere along the lines, I started teaching all their marketing classes and created different products and services. So we got really, really heavily involved with the Rich Dad community. And then probably 5 years into that, we started really diversifying outside of Rich Dad and going direct to market and things of that nature. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Did you get to meet Mr. Kiyosaki?
Multiple times. Yeah. Multiple times,
cool.
Yeah, for sure. Spoke on stages with him a couple of times, yeah.
That Kim joined the family.
Yeah.
Did you know that? Yeah.
Yeah. I was there, at the event when she was there and kind of chatted and kind of told her story. Yeah.
That's
for sure.
cool. Yeah. I mean, every time I talk to an investor, I mean, just a couple of days ago, I had two people, I was doing some more podcasts, and both of them, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, was part of their origin story. Like so many people read that book that just changed their entire perspective on their financial future and how they can accomplish their goals, and just a whole new paradigm on viewing life.
Yeah. I literally traveled the country, man, with the Rich Dad organization. Started basically with, they had monthly meetings and they would call them symposiums. So they would have a monthly symposium, and they would be hosting probably 10 different training classes that weekend, right? So they'd bring in 10 different instructors, and each one of those classes would have, 40, 50 people. So every month, man, you got 500 people at these symposiums, real estate investors. And, just getting to meet so many investors, man, being, grassroots really with so many people that got started. And honestly, man, some of those folks are teaching and training, and they're the gurus today, but I watched them go through the Rich Dad training and education. And, there's certainly pros and cons, man. Rich Dad, I think the training gets a bad rap sometimes because it was expensive, man. I mean, you'd see people write 6-figure checks, right, for their education. Wow. No different than what people probably spend on college, right? But and it would work for some, and it wouldn't work for others, right? And so but the training was the same. The education was the same, right? So you and I both go through it, and you're successful and I'm not. Is it bad training? Or did you apply stuff differently than I did? Did you take things more seriously? Were you just driven? And so I got to see that a lot, dude, a lot firsthand of what is the difference between a successful real estate investor, somebody that's actually going to take the education, take the knowledge, and go implement and execute, versus somebody that, and look, I mean, you got a lot of people, man, they write a big check, they go write a $30,000 check for education. And it's like, that's all I got to do.
Right. I spent the money.
Yeah.
But here's the thing is, without that education, it's likely that many of those people would have found another way to succeed.
Agreed.
Through another path, potentially in different business altogether. But it's like, if you've got it, you've got it. And, it does help to have some accountability and some coaching and some support, and to get you through those rough times and shorten your learning curve, get that, why recreate the wheel? Just follow in the footsteps of others that have succeeded, and you can have the same level of success. So there's a lot of value to, I think, those education systems, and I think they do work. But you're right, not for everyone. Most people just don't have what it takes.
Yeah, I think that's the difference of what I and it's hard to see. Like, nobody can predict it necessarily. People always ask, like, Damon, what's the difference, man? Is it the guy with a bunch of money, or is it the guy that's broke? I'm like, honestly, man, I've seen the broke guy succeed just as many times as the guy with money, because, like, maybe they're in a desperate situation. They come out swinging, they come out fighting, they're driven, they're hungry, they're motivated, as opposed to the guy with money, and he just throws money at the problem, and he's complacent, and he's not really putting in the work. It's really interesting, man, having spent at this point 15 years, 20 years in this space, in this sector, and literally seeing, hundreds, thousands at this point of real estate investors get started. And what does it really take to be a successful entrepreneur at the end of the day? I think that's the other thing too. I think it's really important. If you guys are listening, whoever's listening to this right now, man, like, I think you need to make the distinction that you're a business owner, right? It's not just a real estate investor. It's like, go build a business.
Right.
And what does it take? And surround yourself with others, man. I mean, you and I are in a mastermind together, right? I'm in a couple other software masterminds. I'm in real estate masterminds. I mean, success leaves clues. And the one really cool thing that I love about real estate investing and entrepreneurship at the end of the day, it's the super successful people, man. Like, they want to share. They want you to copy them. You know what I mean? It's like
an abundance mindset.
Yeah.
I think that helps them succeed in the first place.
Yep.
So it isn't any coincidence that there's a lot of go-givers that are successful, because that's what they needed to get there.
Agreed. Yeah. So, it's the old saying, right? It's the giving, man. You receive more when you give. Right. And so people always ask, like, why do we share why do we do these podcasts? Why would we give away all of our secrets and tell you what works and everything else? Why would you do that? Right. Why not? It's like, there's not enough deals in the market, man. I'm in St. Louis, man. I mean, there's plenty of deals here. I can't do all the deals in St. Louis even. Right.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's just it's a mentality. And I think that's one of the other things too, as you mentioned about, the poor guy versus the rich guy, or the guy that has money. And I think it comes down to the why. Like, why are they in this in the first place? What's their goal? Is it, and oftentimes their why is more than just like, I want to be rich, or I want $1 million in the bank. It's something besides the money that drives people.
Well, I think, growing up a broke kid, man, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that I was chasing money in the early days in the start. Right.
Yeah.
Because, as a kid, man, it was always like, man, if I could just make $100,000 a year, like, oh my gosh, like, life would be so much easier if I could make $100,000. And then you do that, and you still got problems, and it's like, all right, man, maybe I didn't dream big enough. I need to make $200,000. And then you make that, and you're like, crap, nothing changed. And then it's 500,000. I remember, honestly, 2012 was the first, I think 2011 was the first 7-figure year. And then 2012 or 2013, I think I hit 2.7 million. And it was like, all right, this still sucks. I've got all the things that I thought I wanted. I got a really cool tech business. I'm doing real estate. Like, I'm making more money. But this sucks. Right. And I don't know that I'd ever taken the time to really kind of sit down and dig in and get really clear on my vision of what I wanted for my life, what I wanted for my business. And I leaned into mentorship. Right. I'm paid $15,000 to go be part of a mastermind, a 3-day mastermind. It was a small group. There was like 5 entrepreneurs, and we went, and it was a larger, very large company actually. And they just received like $53 million in funding. I mean, they were doing extremely well. It's like 500 employees, but we got to go spend 3 days with their CEO. And, I remember sitting there and like, man, we're making money, but I'm miserable. Like, it's not what I thought it was going to be. And, the thing of it is, man, is like, you start saying, like, look, if I make money, then I can hire people to do all the things that I don't want to do. But if you don't really have the right systems in place to hire people, then that goes awry. And then all of a sudden it's just as hard. For me at the time, I had 15 people on the team, and I didn't enjoy the team. I didn't enjoy the people.
Mm.
Like, I hired a bunch of really smart people. We paid a lot of money. We had great benefits, all of that stuff. So it wasn't hard to hire people, but it just wasn't the right culture, man. It just didn't feel good when I went into work. And so I burn it all down. And I actually now teach this. I actually taught this for Rich Dad for probably the last, 3 or 4 years that I was with the Rich Dad organization, but started teaching really how to get clarity around your vision, and not just your business vision, but your personal vision. And I think that's where a lot of people screw up and mess up, is they just go start working really hard. And it's like, look, if I work hard and I make money, then I'll go figure all this vision stuff out. And then I'll, but it's like, the truth of it is, and I now help real estate investors do this, man, is like, let's get really clear on your personal vision. What is it that you really want? Then let's go build a business that supports that vision. And if you do the work and you actually understand what your freedom number is, like how much money do you really need to live that personal vision? And we go through the exercise, you do all that. I mean, it's pretty amazing what people can do on $200,000-$300,000 a year. Like, you don't need to go build an 8-figure business, a 7-figure, like, it doesn't have to be, and I think that's where we get it wrong, man, is I made the same mistake, man. I chased the money. And then at some point you just realize money is just a tool. And what you really want is, you want your time, you want to make a difference, right? You want to contribute back. You want to continue growth, right? I mean, and so it's vision. You got to have vision. You got to have clarity of where you're going. You got to put the systems in place, and then we hire people, right? And then you let people run the systems, and then that's how you build a business, right? With vision, systems, and people, right?
So what was it that was missing at that point, where you were looking at your business and your life and you were just unhappy? Like, can you look back now and know that there was something that was specifically missing?
Yeah, for sure, man. I wasn't clear on the purpose. I wasn't clear on the purpose of why the business existed in the first place, right? And once we went back and got real clarity of what we're trying to do. And so for us, it was like, I love to empower people. I love to empower entrepreneurship, right? And so that's what gets me excited every day. That's what, drives me. And if we can empower entrepreneurs and we can simplify financial freedom, and we do that through systems, software, and education. Once I got that clarity, and those are words today. It's a vision statement. It's like, man, for me, dude, if 10 years ago, you would have talked to me and said, Damon's talking about vision, I would have been like, whatever, dude. Like, that's,
what was I
bananas.
smoking?
Yeah. Because, I think I bought into the segment that the mission, the values, the purpose, like all that stuff was for, you watch these big Fortune 500 companies create these mission statements, and it's like, then they don't really live up to it. And it feels like it's more of a marketing gimmick than, true statement. Yeah. And so I kind of dismissed all of that in the early days. I was like, dude, I'm not going to do any of that. That's just like lame and it's bullshit. It's like, no, just let's go work hard. And we did, and we worked hard and we made money, and, things were going financially, were going great, but like the purpose wasn't clear. And with that, since the purpose wasn't clear and the vision wasn't clear, I hired people that were technically good. They were really smart people and they were good at their job, but the culture didn't fit. Right.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't leading with a vision. They didn't know why they were coming to work other than a paycheck. Right. And so once we burnt that all down and got really clear on the purpose and what we're really trying to do, and empower entrepreneurs and simplify financial freedom for entrepreneurs. Once we got clear on that, and then I started hiring people, I got really clear on our values, defined our values, wrote those out, got really clear, and then started hiring to the vision and to the values. Then I had the right people, and now all of a sudden the culture changes, right? Like now the culture. Now I get excited because I go in and it's like, those are people that they want to do the same thing that I do. They want to make the impact. They want to empower entrepreneurs. They want to simplify financial freedom. And, lo and behold, man, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, like multiple years in a row now, we've won, best place to work in St. Louis but it's not because of me. It's just because we got really clear on our purpose and our vision. And once that became clear, you attract the right people. And then it's like, okay, like, and then it honestly feels effortless. Like it's way easier to do the things that we do today than it was in 2012. Right. because it's like, man, I enjoy it. Like I legitimately enjoy the people. I want to impact their lives. I want to, and together we all want to go make a difference for real estate investors, you know? So.
Well, that makes it fun to go to work every day,
Yeah.
right? You get excited to get up in the morning, and you got a pep in your step, and you're the, first guy in the office. I miss going to the office. I remember those times when you could go there and you got the camaraderie, and there's a little bit more motivation when you see somebody in the office doing some cool stuff, and build some some friendships and some bonds. And I think it's a good thing to have that office environment. You guys still go to the office a lot?
I do. It's interesting, man. We're kind of chatting through it right now because like we've combated going remote, but I've got a lot of remote staff now just because of the economy, the way it works. It's like, man, right. You can go get talent anywhere now. And so I've got about 10 people that come into the office every day. But we're debating on whether we kind of go remote a little bit and maybe a hybrid, because I still, like everything that you just said, man, I still love jumping on a whiteboard and physically hashing out new ideas and things like that. And I just love that. And I think I would miss it too much if I went 100% remote,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think that really does affect the culture too. Like culture it's really more difficult to have it transcend through video or Zoom or, it's different. Right. And when you see people and you get to shake their hands or give them a hug in the morning, like that really helps to kind of be the glue in the culture sometimes.
Yeah. It's hard to have that water cooler talk, which I think is important for the culture. Like, I'm not going to just Zoom you up, Benson, and chat about what you did last night and then turn around and, do a 5-minute Zoom and just, talk about the ball game last night. Right. Yep. That doesn't happen in that virtual, but, in person and those conversations, we could certainly argue about productivity and is it really, you could have that conversation about that it's unproductive to talk about the game for 10 minutes. But, at the end of the day, man, that's what creates those bonds and those connections, and those bonds and connections are what will make you fight for the other guy. If exactly. I go back to the military analogy and I'm like, look, man, we're in the foxhole together. And, you gotta trust that guy and you gotta know that guy. And it goes way beyond jumping on a Zoom call and talking about the agenda for the week. Like I got to know a little bit more about you, man. So yeah.
Yeah. The term FNG.
I don't think I do.
The military. It's like they used it a lot back in World War II. They had the FNGs. It was like the new people that came in when everybody else was dying, right? And they would just do everything they could to not build bonds with them. They didn't want to know their names. They didn't want to know where they were from because they knew that they were going to, get killed. And so like the vets that had been around for a while, and then it was like, if you were there for 6 months, like you were a vet, right?
Yeah.
And so that was that's like a real world example of, how people, if you build bonds with people, it's strength in numbers. But, if you're in an environment where no one wants to know each other and they're literally like trying not to get to know other people, then the bonds are not built.
I think it's tough to win like that, man. I think it's tough to win like that, but yeah.
So what's the new exciting thing in Damon Remy's world? Like you've been doing the software thing for a long time. I don't want you to say like you're tired of it or anything, but what's exciting for you when you look at on the horizon?
That's the cool thing. I think that's the reason I love technology so much, man. And the software is because it's constant. It's not the same thing. I mean, it's constantly evolving and it's constantly changing. AI. I think the term AI gets bastardized, and I think everybody just kind of throws AI on everything right now. It's like, but if you really understand the AI, and we've been doing some cool stuff with AI for years, but the stuff that ChatGPT is doing and just making that content creation, it's amazing, man. I really get excited when I start digging in deeper into AI and how we can help. Basically, and what I think you're going to have to do as a software guy, and I'm sure, I know you're a software guy. I think that instead of like creating AI products I think really what's going to happen, you're going to have to do is you're going to have to bake in AI technologies into your existing platforms and products. And so that's really kind of, I think what we're focused on right now. I think that's we've been doing, REI BlackBook. I've been doing it for, I guess honestly, it's really 20 years probably. Publicly, like taking a paid customer, October 1, 2009 was our first dollar, but we were giving away the product all the way back in 2003, 2004. So it's 20 years. When we built it, the barrier to entry, I think, was a lot tougher, right? I mean, we had our own server, we had, all the hardware, like physically on premise in our office. Now it's like, go whip up a virtual server in the cloud and you're up and running in no time, man. It's insane how fast like things have changed, but that's what I get excited about. And, we built it 15 years ago on old technology stack. So we literally spent the last 18 months basically rebuilding the product from the ground up. It was a super, super painful decision to make. But again, that gets me excited. It's like, all right, we basically, it's almost like, do you go and renovate and rehab a house that's built in the 1900s, or do you build go build a new build? And so we made the decision to tear it down and basically build a new build. And like, we're on the verge of launching that, and that gets exciting, and baking in some of the AI stuff, and just, I don't know, man, it's still fun,
Right.
Like it's,
well, that's what tells me that your why is important. Like the why you've chosen and then the path you're currently on is way more important than the money, because if it's still exciting for you, then the why, you chose the right one.
Yeah. And it again, man, if I knew 10 years ago how much I really love helping other people and seeing them succeed.
Yeah.
It's, I got 4 kids now. I was a big basketball guy growing up, man. I loved basketball, right? I was only 5'6" though, so my basketball career was pretty limited. But I love basketball, and I loved playing, and I loved winning, and I'm a super competitive guy. But now I coach. All four of my kids, man. My oldest son's 19 now. I started coaching him when he was 4. And if you would have told me that I love watching my kids win their basketball games and the other kids on the team more than I liked winning whenever I was that age, I would be like, you're crazy.
Right.
But it's crazy. It is amazingly fun, and it's exciting to watch them win and see that. And I get that same thrill and excitement from coaching my 9-year-old now, basketball team. I love helping the real estate investors, and it's not, and really helping them figure out that the money is just a tool. And maybe you need to make 100,000, maybe you need to make 300,000, maybe you need to make $1 million, whatever the number is, it's just a number. And then we just got to back into like how to get that number, but really being able to help people figure out. And I run a mastermind now. I've got about 30 business owners that I get together with every 90 days. We connect, and to watch them, I just had a guy go from, he got fired in COVID, right? Worked at his job for 20 plus years, got fired during COVID. And in 2023 or 2022, he just had his first 7-figure year, right? And it's like, seeing that, it's freaking awesome. And it's not even about the money, man. It's watching him live the life with his kids and his family, and he's taking his brothers on trips, and his dad, and doing cool stuff, man. And it's like, all right, man, if I can play just a small part of that, and then dude, that's addicting, man. It's addicting.
It is. You nailed it too. Like for me, and I haven't 100% solidified my why. It's kind of a moving target. And it seems to change for me. However, one thing that is consistent is the joy I get out of helping people. Like the last year, I've traveled more than I have probably in my whole life, going to different conferences and events. And I'll always run into somebody who uses Privy or like watches some of my videos online, and they come up and like, they're so like happy to meet me, and like, man, you helped me find my first deal. Or like, man, they're so excited to talk about this like assignment fee that they got, or, they use Privy to like learn about this or that. And like, that's the fun stuff. That's the stuff that gets me out of bed in the morning. When I know that I made a small little impact in someone's life through education or just by them using the software.
Yeah. It's when you were talking about that, man, I think what gets me excited is I remember making that first $50,000 that night. I was like, man, I just made $50,000 in 4 hours. That's like, holy crap. And, you know, I've since gone on to make, you know, 500 grand in a day, you know, like have big days. But honestly, the $50,000 was way more exciting than the $500,000. Right. And it's because of the newness and everything else. And I think part of what you're describing there, man, is we get to relive that through other people, that initial excitement and that initial joy. And it's like, man, you remember what it was like to get your first $10,000 assignment fee or whatever the number is? It's like, that's, man, and to see somebody go from and realizing that $10,000 makes a massive difference in people's lives. Right. I mean, and it's not just about the money. It's about now they can see the possibility. They can see that it's real. And it connects them to that whole other world of getting them closer to that financial freedom, man. And it's when people and from my perspective, man, if we can help more people get financial freedom and we can help them get clear on their purpose, like that's how we make a massive difference in the world, right? Like, like we all get to do good. And I think it's the power of entrepreneurship, man. I mean, I love it. I get excited about it, and you know, and it's cool to help people turn that light on, and whether they use REI BlackBook as a tool to get their first deal or close a deal from leads they completely forgot about or whatever. I mean, you know, it's exciting, man. It's exciting. So
it is. Yeah, I think we're vibing on that one right there, man. And I really do appreciate you taking the time. I love your story, the evolution of coming from, you know, a small town in Texas to like, you know, barely making it, you know, with your mom, and then you moving to going into the military, Camp Pendleton, and going down to Tijuana and having some fun too, and to you know, going to Chicago or you know, Southern Illinois, and then St. Louis, and you're still in St. Louis. Looks like you converted to a Cardinals fan at some point.
I am a Cardinals fan, that's for sure.
Yeah. You abandoned the Rangers some time back, huh?
Well, you know what? I jumped on the bandwagon this year. So the Cardinals didn't do so well. So I became a Rangers fan again this year, you know, so.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's a little taste of home, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, really appreciate you jumping on. Thanks for sharing your story. And yeah, you guys, if you are interested in checking out REI BlackBook, amazing tool. I mean, you don't go 20 years in the business without them doing some things right. So, you know, check out REI BlackBook. Are you doing anything online, social media? Where can people find you?
Yeah. So I'm heavy, you know, all the platforms, man. You just go search Damon Remy, man. Facebook is probably where I'm at most frequently. Okay. My kids remind me how old I am because like Facebook isn't really cool anymore, but it's like, I know how it works. In fact, if you go to facebook.com/Damon R, that's how long I've been on, man. So I've got, you know, no numbers or anything else, man. So I've been on there for a while.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much. I really appreciate you taking the time, and looking forward to seeing you again here at the next Family Mastermind.
All right. Sounds good, man. I appreciate you having me. Buddy. Thanks again.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's Real Estate Revelations. Thank you for tuning into the REI Hacker Podcast. Remember, every property has a story, and every deal is a lesson. Until next time, keep hacking the real estate world.